G'day there, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name's Jess Van Den. Today I'm going to cover something that I talked about briefly in an earlier video and asked if anybody was interested, and that is the story of how I became an accidental entrepreneur. How I turned my handmade hobby into a full-time business, how I started a few other businesses along the way, and how I went from having a normal job to being fully self-employed since 2010. So this is the origins of my story. My origin story, like a superhero. So my journey began in 2018. I just realized I was maybe saying the wrong dates earlier. Was I saying 2018? I meant 2008. I'm gonna have to fix that. Moving on. Okay. Before that, I had a very kind of traditional life. I went to uni straight after school. I did a degree. Now, I did a dual degree, so that means doing 2 bachelor's degrees at the same time, and I did science and arts because I was really interested in philosophy and psychology and like basically how humans work. And then I was also really interested in science and how the world worked. And my plan was to be a research scientist. But when I finished my first degrees, I took a year off because I realized by the end of that, after doing some work in labs and things, that I didn't actually think science was for me after all. I majored in genetics and microbiology. Yeah, I decided, wow, this thing that I wanted to do my entire life from when I was a little kid is not actually what I want to do with my life. It's not what I thought it was going to be. So I took a year off and decided to go back and get a teaching qualification so that I could be a teacher, because I love teaching, I love sharing knowledge, and I thought it was a great trade. It's a great thing that you can do anywhere in the world. So it's a great qualification to have, and it's something I enjoyed doing. So I went back to school again and got my degree for education, and I did a year teaching in a primary school. And I went for primary school because teenagers. I'd rather work with the younger kids. And as someone with a science background, there was a lot of demand for me in schools because it's not a common thing. So I did that for a year, and then I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I loved some aspects of it. I loved the teaching. I did not love all the other stuff that went along with having that job. And after that, I got an awesome job as a science communicator. So I worked on a traveling exhibit, being employed by the museum in my state, the Queensland Museum. I was employed by them for a year to travel around the state teaching biotechnology to high schoolers. And that was a super fun job. And during that job, I met my now husband, Nick, through one of my colleagues. And that will come into the story in a little while. And then when that job finished, because it was a year-long contract, I managed to land myself a position as a manager at a tuition centre. So doing maths and English tuition after school, which was fantastic. And this was my very first introduction to business. Before this, I had zero, and I mean zero interest in like traditional business. I'd kind of played around on the internet since I was a teenager in the 90s. I'd built websites as a hobby, and I always kind of had this dream way back in my head that maybe someday I could make a living through the internet, but I really had absolutely no idea about how to do it. So I'd kind of played around with things over the years, but nothing had stuck and nothing had really worked. So it wasn't something I was really taking seriously. But then when I got this job, I started to learn a bit about business because I was a manager. I had to learn how to sell. I had to learn how to keep customers happy. I had to learn how to manage staff. So there was a whole bunch of skills there that I'd never had before. And I found that I really actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed selling when it was something I believed in. When it was something I thought was valuable, I found it easy to do that. And my husband and I went on a trip, well, then boyfriend and I went on a trip to Fiji, and we were there for I think 5 or 6 days. We made friends with this family, and when we were leaving, the mother gave me a novel. She's like, oh, I finished reading this. I know you love reading. Maybe this can keep you company on the way home. It was called The Friday Night Knitting Club. It's like chick lit. It's not something I would normally read, but in the story, there's a knitting club, obviously, and just the way they talked about craft really resonated with me. And I kind of remembered back to when I was younger, You know, when I was a kid, one of my babysitters taught me how to knit. And then when I was in high school, I did manual arts, so metalwork, woodwork, and I really, really enjoyed that stuff. But then I was on the academic track, so I kind of gave that up and forgot about it. But then I was like, oh, I love this idea of actually creating something with my hands, because all of my work was really cerebral and academic. You know, I never created a finished product. It was always you're part of the process. And so I went to Spotlight, which is like our big box, you know, craft store here in Australia. And I bought some yarn and I looked on YouTube to learn how to knit, and I made a scarf, and it was super fun. And everything kind of went from there, and I was like, okay, well, what about crochet? And then I was wandering around in Spotlight and I saw the jewellery section. Now, I ironically was not someone who wore a lot of jewellery at this point in time. I still don't wear a lot. Like, I wear my rings and some earrings and things, but I'm not a big jewellery person, although I do have quite a collection nowadays. But I saw the jewellery and I'm like, oh, this looks pretty. What can I do here? So I bought a bunch of stuff, just beads and findings and some tools, and started putting it together, and I really enjoyed that. It was super fun. So then I took myself off for a weekend silversmithing course, because I really liked the idea of working with silver. And I learned how to make ring, I learned how to solder stuff together, some other jewellery techniques. And then that was kind of it. Like, at this point, as I said, I'd been, you know, doing websites and blogs for years of different types. And so naturally to me at this point, I started a blog about my crafting and stuff like that. So I was talking about that on my blog, and then I was making lots of stuff and making connections. This was in the 2000s, where social media didn't really exist. So blogs were social media. That's how we connected with each other back then, the comment section. And I was looking around, I'm like, I have these massive piles of stuff that I've made. I can't wear all of this. I've spent a lot of money. What can I do? Well, maybe I can sell some of it. How hard can it be? So I looked around online, and somehow I stumbled across Etsy. And Etsy had only just started, I believe, in 2006. So this was 2008. I found Etsy and I was like, this is the answer to all of my prayers, because I didn't really fancy doing regular markets. I didn't know anything about selling to shops. That seemed way too overwhelming. But hey, I was comfortable with the internet. I was comfortable with the idea of setting up a shop online and selling online. So I set up my Etsy shop, and I think it took about a month for me to get my first sale. And I still can clearly remember that moment when I made my first sale. I remember where I was in my office. Nick was we had a shared office at the time. He was next to me, and I got the email through. It was for like a $10 pair of earrings or something, and I was so excited, so excited. It was like, oh my God, somebody has liked what I've created enough to actually give me money for it. This is crazy. So yeah, I just started selling my jewellery as a hobby, what we call the side hustle these days. And I had really had no intentions of making it a full-time living. You know, I had my job, it was fine. 2008, it was going well. And then, so I just kept doing that, and I was learning more about it, and I was blogging about it on my blog, which was called Ethereal Designs, and I was connecting with other crafters and makers in Australia and overseas, and it was a really exciting time for the creative industries, the craft industry, because, you know, Etsy really opened up the ability for us to sell online. And there were other places as well at the time. There was Artfire, there was Made It here in Australia, there was another one called Blue Caravan, and I had my stuff on all of those sites because I wanted to kind of get in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And back then Etsy was big, but it didn't have, I think, the dominance that it has today. So I got my stuff on lots of different platforms. Then fast forward about a year, and I got married in September 2009 on the school holidays. And then when I went back to work, let me just pause here and explain Australian school years to those of you who are not Australian. Our school year starts in January and our school year finishes in December. So we have then 3 holidays in the middle of the year. So April, June, and then September. And then so September, went back to work for the last term of the school year. And my boss sat me down and said, Jess, I'm going to sell the business because it's a franchise. Would you like to buy it? And I was kind of like, I don't know. And he gave me all the paperwork and I took it home to my shiny new husband and we sat down. Now at the time, Nick wasn't working because he's English, so he was an immigrant, and his visa here in Australia didn't allow him to have a job. So he was living off savings and some rental income from his house back in England. So he was unemployed. He was doing the house spouse thing brilliantly, taking care of everything so I could work. And we sat down and, he's like, well, do you want to do this? Like, do you want to buy this business? Because I'll support you and we can do this if you want to do it. And I really thought about it and I was like, you know what? My heart's not really in it. I don't think this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I enjoy it, but I've done it for 2 years now, and that job was very repetitive. Like every term you did the same stuff over and over again. So this was like heading into the 8th term that I was working that job, and I was like, no, I don't know what I want to do after this, but I don't think I want to buy and commit to this business. So I went back and told my boss, and I said to him, look, no, and I'm going to quit at the end of the year because, he could sell it at any point in time and I wanted a bit more stability. And I was like, I'm going to quit at the end of the school year. And Nick and I had decided to go traveling before we kind of settled down for good. So I worked the rest of the year. I quit at the end of the year and we moved back to my parents' property over the summer because the plan was we bought an empty courier van and we were going to turn it into a camper van and travel around Australia for a year. That's what we were going to do in 2010. So we did that. We converted the camper van. It was super fun. We were living in my parents' shed barn in one room. And my dad helped us convert the thing because he has every tool known to humanity. And then we were done by about late January. However, at the time, I was having some issues with my teeth and they were ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And it was one of those things where you can't leave because you've got an appointment and then you've got another appointment and another appointment. And it actually took till September of that year to get it all sorted out because I had a whole bunch of stuff go wrong at once. I had to get my wisdom teeth out. I had some bad dental work that needed to be fixed and it was a whole thing. Anyway, so about February, I was like, we can't leave. We've finished the van. We don't have jobs. What are we going to do? So I was like, well, I've got this little hobby business that I have been running. I may as well just kind of reopen that because I'd shut it over the summer because we planned on going traveling and I wasn't going to keep trying to make jewellery on the road. So I reopened it and I was like, I'll just sell off some of my stock that I have. Yeah. And because it took so long to sort this whole shenanigans out, by the time September rolled around, the business had kind of taken off. We were selling, I was making heaps of new designs, I was getting more sales, I was working really long hours and really long days, and we had to make the decision, do we stop and go on this trip or do we just keep rolling with this whole jewellery business thing and see what happens? And we decided to do the latter. So we never did get our trip around Australia. We have done most of it. We've done from like the kind of topish part of Queensland all the way around to Adelaide. For those of you who know Australia, you know that's a long way. We did that in a couple of different trips, which was super awesome and super fun. But we never kind of went for the whole hog because we saw the potential in the business. Now at this point, Nick again was working, he was being what I call house spouse, so he was doing everything domestic and we were still, had that income that he had coming in, and then we had the business income. And then slowly over the next few years, I started giving him jobs to do. Like I gave him the bookkeeping and then I gave him the packing and the shipping, and then I started to give him some other admin work, and then he started to learn how to make jewellery. So these days now we both work in the business, and I've taken over some more of the house spouse duties to kind of balance things out. So yeah, it was 2010, and then later that year I started a little magazine, yes, a print magazine called Bespoke, and I ran that for a few years and it was super fun. It was a great way to connect with the especially Australian handmade community. I really, really enjoyed my time running that, but there came a point where I had a bigger idea, and that idea was a course that is called Setup Shop. And the reason I created the course, which is having its, what are we up to now? 9th anniversary, I think, this year in 2022. Because people kept asking me the same questions over and over again on my blog, on Twitter at that point, and Facebook. How did you do this? How did you do that? How did you make this happen? How did you make this work? And I was like, I keep answering the same things. What if I just put it all in one course and made it affordable, and that way people can just learn everything and do it themselves? And I decided to sell the magazine so that I could make space for the new business, which was what's called Create and Thrive, which is my education business for makers that I started in 2013. And Setup Shop was my very first course. And then since then, I've created more courses. I've got my membership, the Thriver Circle, which has been going since 2015. And I'm still, to this day, running Ethereal, my jewellery business, full time. So that is kind of how I accidentally became a full-time handmade business owner. It wasn't my intention in the beginning, but just life happened, circumstances happened, and that's what I ended up doing. And I could not be more thankful that I had those medical issues that got us stuck. Because if that hadn't happened, who knows where we would be now? I don't know what we'd be doing with our life, but it probably wouldn't be this. So it was a great lesson to me in that sometimes something that seems really awful and painful can accidentally turn into something that's absolutely amazing. And that was my experience of, just, I guess, giving me the push to do it, because making that decision is so scary. Making that leap from being traditionally employed to doing it for yourself and being self-employed is really, really terrifying. And I think, for us, I had that bit of buffer. We were, like I said, we were living in my parents' shed, so we didn't have massive rental costs at the time. We were just paying the utilities and our share of all of that, and doing yard work and stuff. And I had Nick supporting me, both financially and, materially, by doing work around the house and taking care of us as a couple so that I could do the work in the business. So I was in a really, really, really fortunate position at that point in time, despite the pain I was going through internally, personally, just with my medical issues, to make that switch. And I don't know if I would have done it otherwise. You never can know if you are going to, but I can tell you that it is the best thing that's ever happened to me, was making that decision to stick with that, to stick with the business and see what might happen. And it was fun. It's been fun and challenging. And we've reached that point where, things are kind of cruising along and life is really good. We have a lot of free time to follow other passions as well. So that's why I'm so passionate about helping other people to start and grow their businesses, because I know how good it's been for me and for my life and for my family. And I really want to help other people do the same. So that's why I'm here doing this on this channel and running my business Create and Thrive alongside my jewellery business. And that is the story of how I became an accidental entrepreneur. If you have any questions about my story, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them. If you have any, if I kind of glossed over anything that you're interested in. I do want to say also that I had a lot of help along the way. I was a member of an amazing Etsy team called the Dust Team, an Australian Etsy team. And I want to give some thanks and a shout out to the women in that team who I've lost contact with now, but honestly, without them, I wouldn't be here, because they gave me so much help and support and helped me to figure out Etsy and figure out how to have, a successful Etsy shop at that point in time. And yeah, so I know how important it is to get help and support. So thank you to all of the people who have helped and supported me along the way. Thank you to all of you who watch my videos, who listen to my podcast, the members of the Thriver Circle. If you've taken my courses over the years, it's all here kind of through a quirk of fate. And without that accidental confluence of things, I wouldn't be here, and maybe some of you wouldn't be where you are either. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye for now.